Testimony from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service and from the Farm Service Agency. After brief opening remarks, members will receive testimony from our witnesses, and then the hearing will be open to questions. In consultation with the ranking member and pursuant to Rule 11E, I want to make the members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. With that, I'm going to make my opening statement and just say good morning again. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing to discuss the implementation of the 2018 Farm Bill and the conservation programs administered by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, better known as the NRCS, and the Farm Service Agency, which is FSA. Today's hearing is an opportunity for members of this committee to engage directly with the NRCS and FSA on the implementation of the current Farm Bill and hear what we should consider as we move forward with reauthorization process. Our Farm Bill conservation programs and the conservation delivery system is a proven model, and it is critical for addressing the many natural resource concerns of farmers, ranchers, and landowners. Farm Bill conservation programs are voluntary, and they're incentive-based, providing direct benefits to both the environment and the producer alike. Another effective component of the Farm Bill's conservation programs is that many of them are locally led. This allows the flexibility in popular programs such as the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, better known as EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. I am hopeful that we will move forward with the 2023 Farm Bill, and we can build on positive reforms of the last few Farm Bills and protect the essential conservation programs and ensure that Title II programs always remain producer first. In recent years, conservation programs have received more attention because of the climate-related co-benefits they provide. I recognize the importance of these co-benefits, but I also think that we shouldn't completely reorient Title II programs towards any one natural resource concern. The Inflation Reduction Act provided significant new funding for the 4 conservation programs and the climate-specific funding requirements in place, meaning they sequester carbon or directly reduce emissions. Despite the initial price tag of nearly $20 billion, the Congressional Budget Office predicts that the department will spend roughly $15.3 billion over the authorized period. This funding comes on top of the $3.1 billion the administration authorized through the Climate Smart Commodities Program, which was funded by the Commodity Credit Corporation, CCC, and was created with no congressional authority. I believe that if we conduct our review of the 2018 Farm Bill's conservation title, we must examine this enormous influx in funding and how these dollars are being allocated by USDA. While many conservation programs are overprescribed, additional funding can't get out the door unless we have the boots on the ground and the available technical assistance providers. And this is why I was proud to introduce the Increased TSP Access Act of 2021 with Ranking Member Spenneberger, which will address the technical service provider shortages. Finally, as we look at Farm Bill's conservation programs, we must ensure that Title II programs will always be voluntary, incentive-based, producer-first, and locally led. With that, I look forward to today's discussion and would like to welcome our witnesses, Mr. Terry Cosby, Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Terry, glad to have you with us. And Mr. Zach Ducheneau, Administrator for the Farm Service Agency. Thank both of you for your service and for being here this morning. And with that, I will yield to Ranking Member Spanneberger for any opening remarks that she would like to make.
Thank you, Chairman Baird. I appreciate the opportunity to hear from these two witnesses about USDA's conservation work, and I thank you for hosting this hearing. Thank you for being here today, Chief Crosby and Administrator Ducheneau. I almost don't recognize you without your hat on. Thanks for being here. Last month, I convened a Farm Bill Summit in my district to hear directly from Virginia crop and livestock producers, farm groups, and conservation organizations about their priorities as we work to craft and advance this year's Farm Bill. We had over 100 people in attendance and heard from a wide range of commodities and perspectives. And I'd like to thank Administrator Ducheneau for attending, for sharing his thoughts about FSA's important work, answering some questions of my constituents, and most importantly, listening to Virginia's farmers, their questions and their feedback. Throughout the day, farmers shared the value of NRCS conservation programs to their operations. They explained that these programs are critical for their ability to fund and start conservation projects on their land and receive payments for protecting land, among other benefits of these programs. Farmers also shared some of the challenges that they experience in enrolling in these programs. One Virginia farmer shared that he spent over a year waiting to enroll in EQIP due to the program being oversubscribed and a shortage of technical service providers in the area, which resulted in a long wait to get a TSP to come out to his operation and help develop the plan that he needed to enroll. In the last year, we've made historic investments in meeting producers' demand for these programs through additional funding, and this is an important step to make sure these funds are there for farmers who want to enroll in these, as the chairman said, voluntary conservation programs. And now we need to focus on making it easier for farmers to enroll in these programs. Among the opportunities to strengthen these programs is the bipartisan bill that I am proud to co-lead with Chairman Baird, the Increased TSP Access Act, which will help boost the number of technical service providers to provide assistance to America's farmers and ranchers. And I want to thank the chairman for his leadership and partnership on this legislation, and I look forward to other opportunities where this subcommittee can strengthen NRCS conservation programs on a bipartisan basis. In closing, I look forward to learning more about NRCS and FSA's work, hearing from you both today, hearing what my colleagues are hearing from the producers in their districts, and our discussion about how the Farm Bill can help support your important missions and our shared goals in moving conservation forward. These programs are popular across all regions and commodities, so we must continue to work with partners to leverage these resources to help farmers, ranchers, and foresters continue their work as the original conservationists that they are. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
The lady yields back, and next we have the chairman of the entire Ag Committee, Mr. G.T. Thompson, and open the floor for any remarks he would like to make. G.T.
Well, thank you, Chairman Baird, Ranking Member Spanberger. I really appreciate today's hearing and the opportunity to hear from Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau. Conservation has always been a high priority for me. I'm proud of the great work the committee has done in the past on this important title, and I'm hopeful that we'll make further improvements in the 2023 Farm Bill. Historically, we start with a question of what is working, what can be improved, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on that very concept. In addition to that question, I have serious concerns whether the department can effectively and efficiently administer an unprecedented and uncoordinated increase in funding showered on you by this administration and the past Democratic Congress. With the IRA funding, I believe we must have a bipartisan, bicameral discussion on the best way to administer this funding. We must admit that some of the funding is unrealistic and would be better used by bringing it into the baseline and spread out over a more realistic time frame. I also think we must remove the climate restrictions and let the locally led model continue without limitation. As I did last fall, let me briefly summarize some of my priorities. We can't prioritize one natural resource concern over all others, and we shouldn't prioritize one solution above all others. Our system of conservation delivery works because it is voluntary, incentive-based, and programs locally led. That locally led component is important because different regions have different local natural resource concerns that need to be addressed. Second, we need to emphasize working lands. There's a reason why EQIP is the most popular and effective program at getting conservation on the ground. Third, we need to encourage innovative solutions through the conservation title. Agriculture has always relied on science and technology and innovation, and we should encourage that throughout the Farm Bill, whether that is through innovations like precision agriculture or innovative ideas like soil health grants to the states. We need to think innovatively. Fourth, we need to encourage more work with the private sector and look to expand technical capacity where we can. Legislation such as Chairman Baird's and Ranking Member Spanberger's increased TSP Access Act of 2023 are critical to addressing this issue. Fifth, we should be supporting working forests in the conservation title. We should encourage forest lands to be a part of Title II and reforms to allow for better management of our national forests. And finally, as I said at the beginning, we need to look at what's working and what needs improvement. We need to look at ways to simplify and modernizing our programs. A lot of the stakeholder input I hear is that RCPP and CRP need to be evaluated and improved to ensure the original principles of the programs continue to be fulfilled. With that, I very much appreciate today's hearing and welcome our witnesses, Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau. Thank you for being here today, and we look forward to your testimony and today's conversation. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record, and so that the witnesses may begin their testimony and ensure that there's ample time for questions. Our first witness of today is Mr. Terry Cosby, who is the chief of the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. And I really wish I had the opportunity and time to read the background and resume of our witnesses today. I think we're very fortunate to have their expertise here, and so appreciate you being here. And with that, Mr. Crosby, or if you'd like to begin, you got 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Baird, Ranking Member Spanberger, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the critical support that conservation programs provide for American agriculture as you consider a new farm bill. My name is Terry Cosby. I'm honored to serve as the Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. I've spent the past 42 years of my career at NRCS engaging with agriculture producers in rural communities, helping them to invest in the land that they work. My great-grandfather purchased our family farm in Tallahatchie County, Mississippi in the late 1800s, and the importance of conservation has been handed down through generations with that family land. The 2018 Farm Bill made it clear that voluntary conservation programs are critical to the continued viability of production agriculture. It also provides new incentives for producers and create new agricultural opportunities in urban communities. The practices and systems supported through our voluntary farm conservation program provide critical benefits for climate mitigation, climate adaptation, enhance wildlife habitat, improve water quality, and water conservation to help agriculture producers make their operations more resilient. As we continue to work with producers to implement the 2018 Farm Bill, we're also excited about the historic once-in-a-generation opportunity to have through the Inflation and Reduction Act to increase the number of producers who can participate in NRCS programs. NRCS moved quickly with the IRA implementation, announcing the availability of FY23 funding on February 13th. Producers are applying to implement climate-smart agriculture and forestry practices and systems through EQIP and CSP can now be funded through IRA, with sign-ups and priorities continue to be set at the local and state level. For ASAP, we held a targeted national sign-up that prioritized grasslands in areas of highest risk for conversions and wetland soils high in organic carbon. The recent released RCPP funding opportunity included Farm Bill and IRA funds for FY23. In order to effectively implement the IRA, NRCS is expanding capacity, streamlining program delivery, improving customer service, leveraging partnerships, and advancing equity. As part of this effort, we sought public feedback through a request for information, receiving over 450 comments from individuals, organizations, and producer groups. We're putting these recommendations to work and will continue to identify and adapt additional changes based on public feedback in FY24 and in future years. Additionally, NRCS has stood up several teams to make our programs more efficient and producer-friendly. The RCPP team, with input from stakeholders and employees, recently rolled out changes to this program, including simplifying technical assistance language, streamlining workflow process to reduce implementation timelines, including additional flexibility for easements to use covered programs, and emphasizing participation by underserved producers and landowners. Likewise, the ASAP team is streamlining workflow processes, improving efficiencies in appraisals, appraisal reviews, and boundary surveys timelines, expanding eligible entity certification, and delegating approval authority to state offices, which reduces the need for waivers. To improve quantification of greenhouse gas benefits of IRA practices, the agency is forming strong collaboration across USDA with its external partners. This will also improve the agency's ability to track trends through the USDA GHG inventory and assessment program. NRCS implementation of the IRA funds of its record of timely and equitable implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The BIL provided $918 million to NRCS programs to rehab aging dams, protect and restore wetlands, and provide recovery from natural disasters. NRCS prioritized serving communities impacted by severe weather as well as underserved communities, including tribes. NRCS accomplishment would not be possible without our more than 10,000 employees in every state and territory across the country. Agency employees work incredibly hard to connect with farmers, ranchers, forest landowners, tribes, and partners to implement our many programs and initiatives. I'm honored to lead so many dedicated conservationists in my role, and I appreciate Congress' support for NRCS, and I work to build resilient agriculture operations, combat climate change, ensure equity, and support voluntary conservation on work lands. I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cosby. We appreciate you being here. Our second and final witness for today's hearing is Mr. Zach Ducheneau, the Administrator of USDA's Farm Service Agency. And sir, you may begin at any time that you're ready. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Baird, Ranking Member Spanberger, Chair Thompson, and distinguished members of the committee. It's always an honor and a privilege to appear here in front of this august body as your administrator. I've been your administrator for 2 years, 3 days, and 2 years, 3 months, and 2 days. And every day I welcome another opportunity to improve outcomes for our producers all across the country. And I've said many times over, anybody that doesn't want this job probably shouldn't be in it. I love my job, glad to be able to work with you all. Ranking Member Spanberger, I appreciated the opportunity to learn from your producers in that stakeholder session, and we took some of those lessons to heart and took them back to the office and went to work. Chairman Baird, members, I look forward to opportunities to visit with your stakeholders out there in the countryside, because that's where we're really gonna get the best input about our programs, finding out from the producers exactly where the rubber meets the road. And I look forward to opportunities to do that in the future, and I'll have our staff keep in touch with you about where we're gonna be in the countryside in case we have a chance to get together. Our conservation programs really fall in 2 to 3 different buckets. First is our Conservation Reserve Program, and that is our largest private lands conservation program, one of the largest in the United States. And through CRP, we pay an annual rental rate to producers on a voluntary basis to engage in conservation measures that help preserve soil health and improve soil health for the future, improve wildlife habitat, and give them another option as they contemplate the economic realities of being an ag producer in this country. We look forward to the opportunities to have conversations about what that program might hold in the future with you all, but I want to share some of the adjustments we've made and the impacts that those adjustments have had. Producers can participate in one of 3 aspects of the CRP program. That's our general sign-up, our grassland sign-up, and our continuous sign-up. Last year, 5.1 million acres total entered into CRP through our various signups, surpassing the 3.9 million acres that exited the program, so we had a net gain of a little over 1 million acres. While the grassland signup is currently ongoing and open, closes Friday, we've received over 15,000 acres covering 15,000 offers, covering 1.1 million acres for general sign-up for CRP. We're currently in the deliberation process to decide how many of those acres will generate contracts. The 2018 Farm Bill established a rising acreage cap for CRP that tops out at 27 million acres this year. And when we came to town, we saw that as a target. We took the intention of Congress seriously, that we should meet those conservation goals, and we've been doing our best to ensure that we're getting producers the opportunity to enroll that amount of acreage in these programs. Secretary Vilsack gave us a charge to increase producer interest and enrollment, so we made some adjustments to the soil rental rates where data supported such an adjustment, increased payment for practice incentives, and increased payment for water quality practices. We also added a climate smart practice incentive for CRP general and continuous signups to better leverage this program for positive climate outcomes. Additionally, we updated grassland CRP last year to reestablish a minimum rental rate of $13 per acre, which has driven record enrollment in that program for each of the last 2 years. We've made significant strides through our work to expand access in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program based on the flexibilities afforded to us by Congress in the 2018 Farm Bill, which allows more locally led partnerships in conservation programs. We're leveraging that especially in the West to some of our underserved communities. 3 tribal nations have enrolled in Conservation Reserve Enhancement programs. I had a chance just last week to visit the Colorado CREP, where we're working with producers in the Republican River Basin to help them transition away from irrigation into non-irrigated cropping in order to maintain their working lands, but also save the draw on the Oglala Aquifer, which is so important to much of our producers across the Midwest. As I close my testimony, I want to share my gratitude for the leadership and the expertise of our Conservation Division, some of whom are in the room with us, and our staff at headquarters, and the 10,000 employees that we have all across the country. Without them on the front line, deploying these programs, engaging with our producers, sharing feedback from our producers, we would not be able to continue to make these improvements and enhancements to the authorities that are granted to us by Congress. I look forward to the conversation that we get to have today as we talk about crafting a new Farm Bill and the work we've done to implement the 2018 Farm Bill. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you being here. At this time, the members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority, and in order of arrival for those who joined us just after the hearing convened. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow us to get to as many questions as possible. And the first individual that I might turn it over to is Chairman G.T. Thompson. Do you have questions that you would like to do?
Sure, Chairman. Thank you very much. Once again, gentlemen, thank you for your leadership. Thanks for joining us here today. Much appreciated. This is important that we work together in these programs when it comes to the conservation programs and quite frankly, everything under the USDA jurisdiction and under the responsibilities that we take very seriously with the Agriculture Committee. Our conservation programs are, we know some of them are significantly oversubscribed. I think it was EQIP in the year 2020. We exhausted, and we put significant funding into this, but the demand for it is huge. I think there were 80,000, 90,000 contracts that we couldn't do anything with. As a result of that, we put forward the Sustains Act that passed unanimously out of this committee, and in December it became law, creating that public-private partnership with for USDA to be able to fund additional conservation. So that said, can you share with us where is the department with using this new authority across USDA conservation programs?
Sir, yes, we have been taking a look at this, and we have several teams that are working at USDA to look at this new authority and try to see how it best fit with the work that we're doing across the conservation family. And those teams are working right now, and hopefully we're going to be gaining a lot of information from the work that the teams are doing to see what authority we have. And, when we talk about accepting money from the outside or from the public, how does that fit into what we're already doing and how will it fit? And so we're working also with our attorneys, OGC, to figure out how can we do this. And so we are currently working on that and looking at it, and hopefully we'll be able to report back more work on that in the near future.
Well, Chief, I look forward to that. Let's not let bureaucracy kill that. You have the authority. President Biden signed that into law. We put a great deal of work into this, and we expect that this will be administered according to the intent of Congress, which our intent is to benefit the American farmer with expanded opportunities in the conservation space. So we appreciate keeping us informed. We'll probably be absolutely be staying in contact with you as this is developed to make sure that we're doing this in in a timely manner, but quite frankly, also one that we stay within the lane of congressional intent. One of the most successful programs in the conservation title that Congress has authorized in the past 20 years is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. It combined all of these regional programs into one program that allows you to leverage funding with the private sector to address specific resource concerns. The question I have is what has happened? The program seems mired now with administrative burdens that make it difficult for people to access. And does the administration have a plan to fix this program, either through administrative or, quite frankly, legislative fixes that continues the principles of a partnership with NRCS? And how specifically does RCPP get fixed?
Sir, we're pretty excited about our RCPP. You know, I had the opportunity to work on the first one out of the gate in 2014, in the 2014 Farm Bill in Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. It was about $20 million. And we were very successful there. And over time, it has changed, but I'm here to tell you today that with all of the work that we've done on RCPP, we're pretty excited. We put a NOFO out this last Friday on RCPP, about $500 million. And the team has done a great job. We had several listening sessions, one in person, two virtual, and we had over 400 comments back from our stakeholders and our partners on RCPP, and it kind of fell into 7 different buckets, and I won't go through all of those, but we heard them, we understand it, and we have 7 teams now that are working through that process, and we've been able to put some of those into the new NOFO that was put out last Friday. A couple of them, we need to simplify our TA. You know, how does that work? How does the partner use the TA authority that we have? And how do you do that? You know, 25% of that can be used for technical assistance. How do you do that negotiations? We looked at that, and that was one of them. The portal was another one. We're simplifying it so that the customer does not have to touch that very often. And if we need more information there, then staff will have to do that. The third one we heard is that our staff was not knowledgeable about this program. So one of the things that we're aggressively training our staff, we're going to have several training sessions for every employee in this country to talk about RCPP and how it works. It is a very important program. And when you talk about that partnership between the agency and the public, that one-to-one investment is huge. And so we're taking it very seriously. We're going to continue to work on this. We're going to have more improvements in 24. These teams are going to continue to work, and we're very excited about RCPP.
Well, Chief, I appreciate the due diligence with which you're pursuing this, increased access. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired.
Thank you, GT. He yields back. And now I'm going to yield myself 5 minutes, if I may. And I want to recognize that my questions deal with the TSP Access Act. And as you know, my colleague, Representative Spanberger, and I recently introduced H.R. 3036, the Increased TSP Access Act of 2023. This bill would address the TSP shortages by expanding on the framework first envisioned in the 2018 Farm Bill. So, Mr. Cosby, from your perspective, how important is increased technical service capacity, whether through your own capacity or through the private sector, to getting conservation funding out the door?
Sir, it is very important, and thank you for the question. You know, I had the opportunity to write the first TSP manual for our agency, and back a few years ago, over this career I've had, and that program is valuable to us. And a lot of times it brings a lot of boots on the ground, sometimes expertise that we don't have. And so we've taken a very good look at that program and tried to figure out how can we strengthen it, how can we make it more flexible. Some of the things that have happened over the last year or so is that we've changed to how we are administering TSP. You know, it was state-driven. You had to go through an exhaustive process to get certified, and it took a while to do it. And these were collateral duties for staff out in the field. So what we've done now is we've made this we've hired some full-time staff to just work on TSP, getting people certified. And then the other thing that happened was a lot of these folks wanted to actually do work in multiple states. And there's different state laws and rules and regulations that they had to follow. So what we've done there is that we have folks that can work with them on which states they want to be certified in. We've also looked at our costs for doing business and how do we make sure TSP earn a living when they're doing this work. We work through that. And so it's very important to our delivery system to have TSPs on the ground to help us do this important work.
Thank you. Do you think that this increased TSP Access Act is important to the delivery of those services?
I do, sir.
Very good. Mr. Dawsono, do you have any comments in that regard?
I do, sir. And as a executive director of a nonprofit before this role, we worked a lot with some of the TSPs on trying to get some of our staff out there in the countryside certified as a TSP. But what became apparent is that there's another step in there as well, and that's technical assistance beyond just the technical service provision. And that's where some of the work that we've done in the department to really stand up a meaningful network of cooperators through cooperative agreements to ensure that our lingo, our jargon, which gets a little bit like alphabet soup, can be translated out there into the languages that our folks are speaking in the countryside. And having that, in addition to that TSP and the increased access to TSPs, is going to help us continue to improve the delivery of conservation programs out there in the countryside.
Thank you. And my next question deals with the IRA funding and the RCPP. The CBO expects that from the $4.95 billion in the IRA funding, Inflation Reduction Act, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program will only be able to spend about $3.9 billion, and it looks like this money will go out the door especially slow in the early years. So Chief Cosby, how does your agency plan to effectively administer these dollars for a program that's authorized at $300 million per year and doesn't spend that much annually? And we got about 55 seconds, so.
What I would tell you, sir, is that we're going to deliver this program, and I think we have the staff and we have the capacity to do this. And as I said, the NOFO went out this last Friday with $500 million available, and we're going to continue to do this, and we think we can get this done. Our team is in delivery mode, and we have a very good team around this country, and we plan to deliver this program effectively.
Thank you very much. And now I turn to Ranking Member Spanberger for any questions she may have.
Thank you, Chairman Baird. Just following up a little bit on this, Mr. Cosby, I saw that NRCS recently announced it will hire new staff, including soil conservationists across the country to support conservation programs. And, you know, as we have already discussed here today, how vital they are to conservation planning and the technical help required for producers to be able to enroll in EQIP or CSP or ASEP or RCCP or RCPP. But I know as part of a greater effort to hire nearly 3,000 new people in the coming years, and with the challenges meeting those goals, can you talk about what are some of the barriers that you all are seeing in hiring soil conservationists or other roles that offer technical assistance to producers?
Yes.
And specifically, which of these barriers might be something we could address in the Farm Bill?
Thank you, Congresswoman. And yes, this is something that we talk about on a daily basis. As of this morning, we're about 10,600 employees. And as you mentioned, we need to hire somewhere north of 3,000 over the next few years. And with those hiring of that staff, and with our attrition rate that we have on an annual basis at about 9%, it's just going to keep us right at where we are right now, even with bringing on that many folks over the next 2 to 3 years. We have a pretty aggressive hiring strategy across the country that we're pretty proud of. And we're doing all that we can with our internships, our third party. We work with a lot with third parties. We have all, right now we're gearing up for our summer students to come in to take a look at us to see if they would like to continue to work for us over the next few years. We are using every authority we have. We had direct hire authority, and we're continuing to look at how we can use that. So we're using almost every authority we have to see how we can bring more folks in. One of our limiting factors has been is that as we hire soil conservationists, the soils course is the limiting factor for folks coming out of college. A lot of universities do not offer that course any longer. We have been working with a lot of the 1890s and the 1862s and Hispanic serving institutions and saying we need to get soils back into these curriculums because that is the basis for everything that we do at NRCS. It is a foundational course that everyone, I think, in agriculture should have, no matter what your major is in agriculture. You should have a soils class. And so that is one of the things that we're struggling with. But
Sir, if I could interrupt you. So universities just aren't offering it, which is a limiting factor. Is that a limiting factor in terms of just who is, as a result, like qualified for the positions you're hiring for? Is that like a baseline that they could get as part of their training once they've been hired? Could you just speak a little bit more about how that creates a challenge and where we might be able to step in with support?
For the soil conservation position, it takes 30 hours in natural resources. It takes 12 in plants and soil science, and then it takes at least 3 in soils. And the 3 hours in soils has been the limiting factor with a lot of our soil conservationists coming in. Now, we do have a lot of other positions that don't require that. Our technician positions, our engineering positions, some of those type things, we don't require it. But for our professional ranks, that is a limiting factor for us getting folks on. And then when they come on with us, we may have to bring them on in a different fashion, and then they promise to go back and get that soils course, because that is a requirement.
Of the position?
Yes.
And what have been the responses when you've been doing the outreach to the universities about how important that coursework is to your workforce?
I would tell you it's been outstanding. Most of them didn't understand that dropping that would be a dilemma for the folks that are graduating from that university. And I will tell you, some of the colleges just don't have the funding to make that happen. When the soils course, you got to have laboratories and all those type things. And so it is a limiting factor for funding for some of the universities.
And just zooming out in my limited time, beyond kind of some of these specific hiring challenges, if I'm curious, what could be some of the ways that we could encourage the next generation to enter conservation-related or agriculture-related positions? Certainly, many of us have incredible organizations like FFA in our districts that are really making sure that students are aware of the opportunities. But in the remaining time, would you have any comments on what we could be doing better as a nation?
It is a K through 12 program. We need to make sure that we start early on with students. We have a lot of people that are graduating in some ag-related field or agribusiness, and they just don't know what they want to do yet. But I will say that what we do is important, and we'd love to have them come work for us.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.
The lady yields back, and now we go to my good friend from the great state of Oklahoma, Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Chairman Baird. Chief Crosby, I believe the last time we spoke, we were standing on a watershed structure in my home county in Roger Mills County in the 3rd District of Oklahoma. And as you were able to see that day, I come from a community that is fiercely supportive of the watershed construction and rehabilitation programs and has been for generations. These programs are vitally important not only to my home community, but to the entire state of Oklahoma, a place that is a home to over 2,000 watershed structures. So, Chief Crosby, could you speak to the importance of the watershed program nationally and give us an update on how the watershed funding included in the recent infrastructure package is being spent?
Yes, sir, and thank you, and good morning, and thank you for being a champion for the watershed program. I know you've done that for a lot of years, and it was a pleasure to be out in Oklahoma with you to look at one of the watershed that you and one of my successor, Mr. Pearlie Reed, was at early on, and so thank you for that. And this program is hugely important. BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, gave us about $918 million within this program, and it went into 3 different buckets. One was watershed operations. It is very important for the operations to have funding because we're looking at new projects. How do we go into some of these communities and help protect them from flooding? And the next bucket that it went into was a rehab. We have a lot of dams out there that are at their 50 to 60 year mark. They're aging. The emergency spillway is not functioning. A lot of these pipes have rusted out. We need to replace them. And so we have a lot of structures out there that need a lot of help. And I was just in my home state of Mississippi and saw some of those in my backyard. And a lot of times, folks live downstream from these dams and really don't know what type of protection it is providing for them. And then the third bucket is our emergency watershed protection, EWP. You know, we had over 60 different events this year that we've responded to with EWP. The amount of success we've had with this program is tremendous, but we have a huge waiting list of folks that are trying to get in. Now, one of our limiting factors is that with these events, these storm events and things that are happening, it takes a lot of staff power to do this. And so we're mobilizing folks to wherever in the country that we need this help. We have a huge waiting list. We have a lot of folks that are saying, hey, when are you going to get to us? And so we're trying to make sure that happens. But a huge shot in the arm with the BIL and the $900 million.
Last Congress, I, along with my colleagues, introduced the Carbon Sequestration Collaboration Act. This legislation directs a coordinated research effort across the Department of Energy, Agriculture, and the Department of Interior to improve our ability to sequester carbon through land use. Specifically, the legislation is in response to the great need for research and development to support the accurate and affordable monitoring, reporting, and verification of carbon sequestration and other conservation outcomes. Could you both speak to how this knowledge gap may limit the capacity and the impact of programs administered by both NRCS and FSA now and in the future?
Certainly, sir, and I appreciate it, and thanks for the question. Having the right set of data is going to be important in making the adjustments that are going to continue to drive the enrollment in these programs, drive the participation in these programs. And we use some of the money that we have access to do monitoring, assessment, and evaluation of conservation impacts in our CRP program. Some of those are directly focused on carbon sequestration. But I think one of the important aspects of the work we do is that we take it broader than that, and it's not just about carbon sequestration, it's about how do we balance that with working lands. And it's my belief, sir, that if we don't have working lands in conservation, we're not taking advantage of the full opportunity to sequester carbon, because anybody that's seen that CRP field that hasn't had enough wildlife on it or hasn't had enough animal impact knows that it doesn't continue to cycle that carbon through. So it's important to have the right set of data to make that determination, and we're working to build that out.
Chief?
Yes, we're also working to do the same thing. This last year, we created what we call LACEMA 221. It's a conservation evaluation and monitoring activity. And what this does is help us on the soil organic carbon stock and doing this, these evaluations. How are we sequestering? We're looking at greenhouse gas emissions. How are we helping with that? And it's going to be very important as we apply these conservation practices to explain to the public, what is the benefits and what are they getting for these dollars that they're investing in conservation.
Indulge me, Mr. Chairman. Chief, one last quick question. How many authorized personnel at NRCS? How many funded by the appropriations process? How many vacancies?
We're at 10,700 this morning.
Authorized?
Authorized. We can go to 11,000 authorized. And we are going to try to get there, and then we're looking at over a little over 3,000 employees over the next 3 to 4 years.
So there are 3,000 vacancies approximately?
Somewhere around that, and we have about a 10% attrition rate, so we lose about 1,000 folks every year.
I appreciate the chairman's indulgence and yield back.
Thank you, and the gentleman yields back. And next, we're going to go south to New Mexico to Representative Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Chief Cosby, Administrator Ducheneau. Thank you for both attending this hearing. USDA's voluntary conservation programs like EKIP and CSP are some of our best tools to conserve our agricultural lands for future generations. To me, conservation has always been taught as the wise use of natural resources, using our resources in a fashion that leaves something behind for the next generation. So let me first say that I am glad to see that New Mexican farmers and ranchers have taken advantage of USDA's conservation programs, and proud that my state benefits from programs like EKIP. However, in talking with some of my constituents over the last several months, some producers from my district feel that these federal programs aren't working well enough. The Middle Rio Grande Conservation District For example, manages conservation and irrigation programs in Bernalillo, Socorro, and Valencia counties in my district. They recently told me how they tried for over a year and a half, 18 months, to enter into a regional conservation partnership program with NRCS, but ended up backing out due to delays and a lack of certainty in communication. A farmer in Socorro County that worked with NRCS is stuck now with a concrete irrigation ditch that is less efficient than his previous dirt ditch because of what he characterizes as a lack of coordination between the service and the local conservancy district to ensure it functioned as it was intended. And recently, a group of constituents attempting to get an urgent small watershed program project moving to address rural flooding were told by NRCS representatives it would take 5 to 6 years before they could even get the project off the ground. Now, in this drought and climate crisis, and with this influx of funding from the IRA, we cannot meet the moment if government is slow and works inefficiently. Every growing season is critical, and if farmers and ranchers are continuously delayed in working with NRCS, they simply won't enroll. Chief Cosby, how often do NRCS applicants back out of projects citing reasons of delays?
Sir, I'm not aware of very many projects that we've backed out because of delays, but I will tell you that that's something that from day one that we've been really working on. When we walked in the door, there was a lot of things that had already been set in play, and I'm really happy today to tell you that we've turned that corner and we've improved these programs tremendously. And we don't expect that to happen into the future, especially with our CPP. If you look at the RFP that we put out on last Friday, there's a lot of flexibility there, and we've built a team around this, and I think you're going to see us deliver a very efficient program. So we don't expect that to happen any further. And because we understand that when you can't get this implemented and you can't get it on the ground, it affects producers. It affects their livelihood, their productivity, it affects everything around that. And the team that we've built to help with this is going to deliver.
Thank you so much, Chief. I appreciate that. And I think programs like this have an impact beyond the subscribers of these programs. You know, we face landscape scale challenges, and I think these landscape scale solutions are important, and every little project that gets funded helps contribute to solving the crisis that we face, at least in my state, New Mexico, with droughts and with wildfires, and of course, the unfortunate, often decision we have to make to fallow lands to be able to conserve the water that we need for the future. So because these programs are so vital, according to the 2017 Census of Agriculture, mentioned that the American farmer is almost average of 58 years old, and only 8% of farmers are under 35 years old. So we need folks to actually be subscribing to these programs in the future, the farmers of the next generation. Administrator Ducheneau, given how difficult it is for the next generation of farmers to get into agriculture, what can FSA do to improve credit availability for young and beginning farmers, and particularly those that are working today on leased lands and not owned lands?
Thank you very much for the question, sir, and 45 seconds isn't enough to do that justice, so we will get back to you. But in short order, we're working to streamline our loan application process and eliminate the barriers between producers in those circumstances and participation in our deal. We've got by far the best opportunity for producers to take advantage of the opportunity to get into agriculture with our credit programs, and we continue to refine that. And you'll see some of those provisions that we've offered indicated in the President's 2024 budget. We welcome a chance to follow up more deeply with you on that as you consider your options for the 2023 Farm Bill.
Thank you so much, and it would be great to have perhaps a meeting with some of our constituents, especially our associations of young farmers, to better explain to them how the FSA plans to implement these changes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
I'd love to get back out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back, and now we go to my good neighbor from Indiana, Representative Miller from Illinois.
Yeah. Chief Cosby, in your testimony, you state that the USDA is focused on ensuring rural America plays a key role in our transition to cleaner sources of energy. I'm very concerned about the use of solar panels on prime farm ground. Is it the policy of NRCS that the placement of solar panels on prime farm ground is good conservation practice?
Ma'am, and thank you for the question. And I know this has been a topic of discussion around the country, and we have not taken a position on that. NRCS has not. What we do is we deliver conservation practices, and I think that's our lane, and that's where hopefully that's where we plan to stay, is delivering conservation practices. And when it comes to solar panels or even conversion of farmland, it's something that's happening at an alarming rate across the country.
Yes.
But hopefully that when that happens, that we are doing conservation practices, conservation measures to make sure we don't have erosion on those sites.
Well, not just erosion, but this is prime farm ground. We're seeing tens of thousands of acres in Illinois being taken out of production, and these solar panel, like whatever you want to call it, it's not really farming. Solar panels are covering that land. But in general, does the NRCS consider it good conservation to put hazardous materials on land?
I'm not sure I'm following the question, but what I would say is that we have not studied this. We have not been involved in installing solar panels, so I can't answer that question for you.
Recently, in a letter to shareholders, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase suggested the government should use eminent domain to take private property to get adequate investments fast enough for grid, solar, wind, and pipeline initiatives. Can you assure us all here today that the USDA does not agree with this statement?
Ma'am, again, I have not read that. I'm not sure exactly what's in that, but again, we have a distinct role in NRCS and Farm Service Agency. We have a distinct role, and we'll leave that up to other folks to decide how that works and when that happens.
Administrator Ducheneau, as I am sure you know, the USDA's Equity Commission report was very critical of the county committee system at FSA. Can you talk about how the county committees are important to FSA?
Yes, ma'am. And it goes to the opportunity to have local input. And really, the FSA county committee structure is one of the only places in the federal government where citizen stakeholders can have that level of input in program delivery, program eligibility, and program determination.
Yes.
That can have benefits, and those benefits can also sometimes inure to those that are at the table. And in some cases, and what the Equity Commission was getting at is oftentimes those committees aren't truly representative of the diversity in that particular county that they represent. And the Equity Commission was contemplating whether or not there should be some adjustments made to ensure appropriate representation, not only across diversity of people, but across diversity of production practices and diversity of production goals. So that's, I think, what the Equity Commission is getting at.
Do you think the USDA's time and money would be better spent promoting policies that help farmers instead of playing political games with an Equity Commission?
It's a really good question.
Yes.
We did not ever stop developing policies that work for farmers while the Equity Commission was doing its deliberation.
But we are diverting time and money in that area instead of looking at policies that promote supporting farmers and producers. Last Friday, I had a Farm Bill roundtable with many of my constituents. I can tell you they are much more concerned about their ability to pass on family farms to the next generation and feeding America than they are about equity and climate change. I hope that the USDA will change course and focus on real issues that farmers are facing.
Thank you, ma'am. In conversations that we have across the countryside with producers of all types and all backgrounds, they want the same opportunity that your producers are talking about.
Thank
And
you.
our job is to ensure that we're deploying those equitably across all of our farmer stakeholders.
Thank you so much.
The lady yields back, and next we go to Hawaii, and that's Takuda, Representative Takuda.
Thank you, that's perfect. Thank you for your testimony today. I want to first begin by thanking your teams in Hawaii for their dedication to helping producers in our state. I recently held meetings with ag producers on 5 islands in a 5-day time period earlier this month and invited all of our federal partners from USDA to each of my Farm Bill listening sessions. J.B. Martin, Director of NRCS Pacific Islands area, joined me on almost every island to speak about programming available to them, which greatly benefited everyone in attendance. FSA State Director Joy Kono's team also joined me at every listening session, and Chris Kanazawa, Rural Development State Director for Hawaii, the Western Pacific, was also in attendance. And this really helped make sure that we could connect our federal programs with farmers, producers, and ranchers on all of the islands within my district. So please extend a warm mahalo from me to all of your Hawaii teams and representatives. During these listening sessions, I happened to take a small prop plane over to the island of Molokai, and what I saw when I looked out the window was a disaster area. You could see large amounts of red dirt runoff, choking off the ocean, killing off the local coral reef fish. Many in our islands actually live off subsistence farming and fishing. This is taking away their ability to feed themselves. On Molokai, I also toured degraded cattle land with Uncle Walter Riddy and his team. I saw eroded dirt roads that were as deep as I am tall, and I'm not even joking. And this is exacerbated by invasive species as well as ungulates like axis deer and feral pigs, which are just ravaging our land. Mr. Cosby, we've heard from a number of members of this committee, the leadership of the committee, about the historical oversubscription of EQIP. We've heard about delays that are being experienced. Is NRCS looking to prioritize awards for certain practices, producers, or regions with funding from the Inflation Reduction Act? And in particular, is NRCS considering setting aside IRA funding for indigenous and traditional conservation practices that are unique to certain areas and growing conditions, perhaps even looking at rural and remote communities with limited access to infrastructure and that have been hit hardest by some of the weather impacts we are seeing right now?
And thank you for your question, ma'am. And I would say to all of those, yes. And I would go a little bit deeper to say that, our programs are, and we talked about this, they're locally led. We try to use the local led process. And on an annual basis, we give budgets out to our states. And Mr. Martin is a newly elected, selected director down in Hawaii, and he's doing a great job. But we try to work from the locally led process, and we let the local folks try to decide what those resource concerns, what those research needs are. And then we have what we call the State Technical Committee that information flows up to, and Mr. Martin and also the FSA director, they get input from that committee. They talk about how those programs should work on a statewide basis, or in your situation, on an island basis, and administer it because of what the local needs are. And so I know that they're down there taking sign up right now, and I know it's working pretty well. And the influx of IRA dollars just help us. Last year, we were only able to fund 1 in 3 contracts through EQIP. And so it's given us a huge shot in the arm. Our staff right now is processing about 29 contracts per hour. We're ahead of where we were last year. Last year, just with the 18 Farm Bill, we were only about 25% committed to contracts. This year, we're over 30%. Our talented staff out there are doing a great job. They're implementing this, and I just can't be so happy about our staff and what they're doing. And we're really implementing and delivering.
Thank you. And I will just say, I know I've got limited time, that given that we've got so much to do, we have resources we should be able to get out there and deploy, but I am a bit concerned right now about recent reports of the Agriculture Appropriations Bill cutting the top line amount for NRCS by $29.7 million. I really do feel that this is going to kind of shoot us in the leg right now as we are trying to deploy out more much-needed resources and supports to our farmers, ranchers, and producers. We've heard about it here today in terms of the oversubscription. We've heard about delays. I think this would be behooving us to really cut this amount any further. It would limit your staff's ability to get the work that they need done. We need more staff than less. So in particular for myself, I am concerned about rural, remote areas like Hawaii and the Pacific Islands that right now Mr. Martin has a lot of work to do and very little resources and a team to be able to do that. Given my 10 seconds I have left, I will say that a big concern for us includes ungulates. As I've mentioned, access here is a big issue. I think we need to look at ways that we're going to be able to fill gaps and outstanding issues using equip funds and other monies to be able to help our ranchers and producers manage an overwhelming amount of invasive species. Thank you, Chair. I yield back my time.
The gentlelady yields back, and now we're going to go to the great state of Minnesota with Representative Finstad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Spanberger, for holding this important hearing today. And to you, Administrator Ducheneau and Chief Cosby, thank you for your testimony and your continued leadership. As a proud fourth-generation farmer from southern Minnesota, I know that farmers are the best environmentalists in the world. I see this every day. We work every day to protect our water and our topsoil, not because the federal government tells us to do it, but we do it for the next generation of farmers and families that we're proud to be raising. And so we want to make sure that we can continue to work to fuel and feed the world. So with that being said, a couple questions in regards to the CRP program. Administrator Ducheneau, across Minnesota's first district, we're seeing CRP rates compete with or exceed land values per acre of farm ground. It's making it difficult for farmers to secure new ground and maintain current leases for land. As you know, in the 2018 Farm Bill, Congress capped CRP payments at 85% of county rental rates. So I guess my question is, do you believe that reforms made to the CRP program in the 2018 Farm Bill are achieving their goal of limiting competition against farmers for prime farmland?
You know, thank you for the question, Congressman. During one of the trips I had a chance to make out to Minnesota, we had a visit in Rice County in Minnesota and saw firsthand some of the ag production there and talked with some of the producers. Also, during one of those visits, we had a chance to talk with some of the distressed borrowers who we've been able to help with the Inflation Reduction Act. And that young fellow that we did help mentioned, I go around and I have to get the cheapest, poorest land in the county and try to make it work on that because of the competition. He didn't mention the competition with CRP. He mentioned the competition with other interests that really, I think, more are indicative of a consolidation of resources. And when one small producer goes out, typically another producer gets bigger and we lose bodies in our rural communities. To your question, though, I think that the incentives that we offer in CRP give producers a meaningful choice. And the choice that they make with their resources is not for us to dictate. Our job is to get the opportunity out there in front of them so that they can make the best choice. Now, on the side of those that need to acquire that land, we continue to work to refine our credit opportunities so that we're ideally positioned for those beginning farmers, taking advantage of the tools that we have to offer. Again, as land prices increase, our ability to deliver those loan programs continues to diminish in respect to the opportunity that's there. So welcome conversations with you and your stakeholders, sir. Would love to visit more about it. But I think we're offering a great opportunity for a voluntary and incentive-based program. And there are county-wide limits that limit the amount of land can be enrolled that are set elsewhere, not at the department.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that answer, and I do welcome a further conversation because I think it's healthy for us to have a conversation about what does CRP 2.0 look like? What with all of the science and advancement that we have with soil science, with precision agriculture, with really understanding the soil, I think it's important for us to make sure that as we look at, especially in southern Minnesota, some of the most fertile prime farmland that we have, every time we take an acre of that out of production, we lose that and we become more vulnerable, and really food security is national security. So It's a conversation that we have to keep on happening, that we have to make sure that happens. In 2021, USDA added a 10% inflationary adjustment for both the general and continuous CRP contracts to, quote, increase program payments to encourage more land enrollment. This move incentivizes farm country to take high-quality land out of production. FSA touts several programs to help young and beginning farmers. Yet I've heard from some of these very same young and beginning farmers in southern Minnesota that CRP rates have forced them to compete with the federal government for farmland. So currently we pay a percentage of the county rental rate for land going into the program. Would you be in favor of the general idea of paying more for marginal land and less for prime farmland so the program doesn't compete for productive farmland?
I think that's what some of our incentive payments actually do, is incentivize that land in the margin. Think about buffer zones, buffer strips. While I was on that trip to Minnesota, I had a chance to visit with tree range poultry who are working on the fringes of prime farmland to do free-ranging poultry production for some of the underserved producers there. I think there's a lot of opportunity in considering that on a more granular level. And with our erodibility index tool adjustments we've made, we're looking more precisely at the land that's being enrolled so that we can move towards something like that, sir.
I appreciate your comments, and I look forward to further conversations. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman yields back, and next we go to Illinois for Representative Budzinski.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you to the panelists for being here today. My question is really first for Chief Crosby and Administrator Ducheneaux. I understand that there has been really positive feedback from stakeholders responding to the launch of the Increasing Land, Capital, and Markets Access Program from last August. I believe that this program will be a critical tool in meeting the needs of our new generation of farmers, which you've heard a lot about already from members of this committee, the importance of them, and in addressing our crisis of land access. As we eagerly await award announcements, can you provide us with any insights into what the department may need to successfully run this program over the next 5 years, and if it is permanently authorized within the Farm Bill?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. I believe we've put out a $300 million opportunity in that, and I know that we've had oversubscription for that. So to me, that indicates that there are a lot of solutions out there in the countryside from our stakeholders that we may not have contemplated yet. And I think continued support for that type of on-the-ground research, shopping those good ideas and empowering people to take control of that, to improve land access for the very same beginning farmers and ranchers that struggle to find a way to carve out a footprint. And it's not just about the access to the prime farmland, it's access to opportunities in urban centers and rural tribal nations. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We have to continue to support these initiatives if they're going to grow roots and take a hold and grow into something new.
Okay. Anything you might like to add, Chief Crosby?
Nothing to add to that. Mr. Ducheneaux is doing a very great job over there handling this.
Okay, great. I'll move on to my next question. Actually, that's for you, Chief Crosby. I'm really excited. I was excited that the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities launched last February, and in September, the Secretary announced $2.8 billion in 70 selected projects under the first pool of funding, with an additional 71 receiving $425 million in December. As we work to have more farmers transitioning and working toward the implementation of more conservation and climate-smart practices, I'm curious if you've identified ways you can continue to incentivize innovation in this space, and whether adding NRCS practice standards is something achievable for growers who may not have had the technical expertise to navigate these programs.
Well, I would tell you that it's been pretty exciting to watch that program and watch how it has flourished. And, you know, when it all started, the Secretary made a $1 billion available, and we had almost, $20 billion worth of requests for that $1 billion. And so we went back and added a little over $2 billion to that. So $3.1 billion went into climate smart commodities, and there's a lot of excitement across the country. I mean, when you look at the amount of folks that applied for that program, the commodity growers across the country that really wanted to work with us and work with their producers to get conservation on the ground, and we're talking about climate smart solutions. When you look at the new and expanding market opportunities that this is going to have, it's going to be a tremendous program. And when we talk about our conservation standards, practice standards, we review those on a rotational basis. But over the last few years, we've looked at all of those, and we make sure that it is up to date. It has new technology. We're looking at how do we include indigenous type information into those standards. And I think we have some of the best standards in the world. And when you look at these practices, you know, when you talk about the co-benefits, one practice does not have one solution. It helps with several solutions. And when you use these practices in a system approach, it's tremendous, the benefits that we're having, whether it's a climate benefit, whether it's a water quality benefit or a wildlife habitat benefit, the co-benefits are tremendous.
Thank you. And if I could fit in one more question that's more specific to my area in central and southern Illinois. At the beginning of the month, a blowing dust storm swept through central Illinois in my district. An unusually dry spring combined with sustained winds tragically caused blackout conditions, causing 8 deaths and many more injuries. What can your agency do to help producers and communities impacted by these types of events?
Ma'am, you know, we heard about that, learned about it, and our hearts go out to the families that lost loved ones and lost family members there. But, you know, one of the solution is through our conservation systems approach and getting good soil health measures on those acres. And that's something that our team will continue to do. It's something that we'll continue to reach out, and it's done on a voluntary basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back, and now we go all the way to the West Coast in California. Representative Duarte.
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 Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I represent a whole bunch of orchard and vineyard growers in my district that just love the EQIP irrigation efficiency grants, and oftentimes on new plantings. Many of those grants have requirements that do not allow the beginning of installation of an irrigation system until grant payments received. Now, Mr. Cosby, you've let us know that you've got many of your staff diligently working at a rate of 29 approvals per hour, and we appreciate that, but nothing can happen until the check gets to the farmer, as I understand from many of my constituents. Is there anything we can do on our end that would allow these projects to begin installation on the farm at a time they're approved, rather than waiting for the initial payment of the grant to show up?
Thank you, sir, for the question. And there is an option called advance payments, and it's really available to the farmer to use that option. When they come in and sign up, and as soon as they're approved, they can ask for advance payment, and we can make that, and they have up to 90 days to start the work after they receive that advance payment. So yes, we do have an option where we can get farmers started right away, and then they can continue. A lot of these contracts are 3 years, and they stretch those practices out over that 3-year period. But if they want to start right away and going to get something done in that first 12 months, we can issue them an advance payment.
Well, thank you. That's great news. And could you please send me even a link that I could share with my local farm bureaus?
We would do that, sir.
I appreciate that. Sounds good. Next set of questions for you, Mr. Deschanel. We had the EPA director in here, Michael Reagan, a few weeks ago. We had a lot of concerns here in the Ag Committee about logistics, farm power, mobile diesel engines that we use, that certain EPA regs are going to make very difficult to keep compliant in the upcoming years. And we actually counted this. I had my staff count it. He referred to biofuels 32 times during that one hearing as the solution to some of the power requirements on farm and other issues we'd be facing. Well, you know, and I know, without much imagination, that level of reliance on biofuels, in addition to what we're already pulling out of ethanol and biodiesel, is going to be quite extraordinary. Are we to take this serious, that the commitment on the federal government's part to provide that kind of growth of supply of biofuels in order to fuel our economy versus diesel and what we might drill is actually coming? And have you integrated those demands into your FSA programs with your, right now we've got 140 million acres tied up in endangered species habitat, conservation reserve, and other set-aside acreages. That's the size of California and New York, not electorally, but nonetheless. How have you integrated all that together? Can we believe the biofuels are on the way to power our farms?
I think they can be a valuable tool to power our farms. Many of our producers across the country already use some version of biofuel to do it. I think our tools are designed to help our producers participate in the viable marketing of agriculture products for whatever the end use, whether it's biofuels to power the farms in California or the food and fiber that feed and clothe the nation and beyond. The tools that we have to deploy are really about giving producers those options, providing that safety net, and in some cases, providing that finance opportunity to help them get their foot in the door.
To revisit, conservation set-aside programs in endangered species habitat preserves don't produce biofuels or food or anything else other than habitat and conservation land. Where are we going to get the growth of biofuels, and what % of our nation's power do you think will be incrementally supplied from biofuels going forward? And do you have specific goals within your program to make that happen?
I think there are a lot of people that have a way better estimation of the capacity for the percentage of our fuels that can come from biofuels. But I will offer that the programs within our conservation portfolio are more and more working lands conservation, and we're offering producers the opportunity through CREP agreements and other types to maintain production while we engage in those conservation measures. And you don't have good wildlife habitat without some type of production on that acreage. You need the animal impact as well. So I think they go hand in hand together, sir.
So you're going to repurpose set-aside acreage for biofuels production in some specific quantity?
I do not believe that's what I said, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
The gentleman yields back, and next we go back to Illinois. Representative Sorensen.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you all for being here today. I'd like to talk about the driftless area. The driftless area covers nearly 25,000 square miles in the heart of the upper Mississippi River Basin, spanning 4 states, where glaciers missed the scouring of the land in the last ice age. The place is special, and it includes my district in northwestern Illinois. The region features extremely productive but very fragile soils, vulnerable to erosion. And especially being a meteorologist, we're seeing more of this happen with heavy rain events and increasing severe weather as our world warms. The USDA recognized the driftless area in Dalsea in 2012, but that program ended in 2017. And our region's needs for this overarching program continue today. As we heard from my colleague from southern Minnesota, across the aisle, we need NRCS to properly implement many of the conservation programs in the Farm Bill. So for Chief Crosby, my question to you, what are the benefits of having a conservation program to protect the driftless states like the one the USDA created in 2012? Chief Cosby.
Congressman, thank you for the question. And I would tell you that when you look at these, and I would call it probably a landscape initiative, when you look at these types of landscapes, and when you can dedicate a set of funds for that, and you can do the outreach to the producers to come in and do these things, I think you're pretty effective. We have these all across the country where we concentrate just on that area. And the driftless area is one of those areas that we have concentrated on, and we offer this. And then from the local standpoint, how do you build what those conservation needs are? What are the resource concerns? Because they could change over counties, they could change over states. And then how do you build something successful around that? And then how do you put funding towards that? And I would tell you that a lot of the things that we offer would fit there. When you talk about EQIP, you talk about CSP, you talk about RCPP, ACEP, all the programs that we administer would fit in that area.
That's very good. And to continue, in a different realm, as a meteorologist, we're identifying an increasing El Nino for this growing season. And many of the producers in my district remember all too well what happened in 1988 So, Chief Cosby, you utilize waivers to help producers dealing with drought. Could you provide us with some more detail about these waivers? And then a follow-up, are there common ones that we might want to address in the next Farm Bill concerning drought?
So anytime you have to use waivers, it's interesting when it's not something that's permanent. And you use waivers at the discretion of what you're trying to accomplish. But I would tell you that the investments that have been made especially with the 2018 Farm Bill, and then when you put IRA and you put BIL and some of the other things on top of that, these investments, I think the resources are there. We just need to do probably a little more look-see and see where we could build on what we started there in the driftless area, and maybe how we build on that, and how do we do the outreach to producers to come in on that voluntary basis to do these practices. And I think we could work with you to look at this and maybe study this and see how we can expand.
I appreciate that. To you, Administrator Ducheneau, I'd really like maybe a little bit more clarification from the previous line of questioning. In my district, the farmers and the producers are ready for biofuels. We in northern, western, and central Illinois, we are ready to power the future. The farmers understand that we're being dealt a different set of cards today through no fault of them. How can I best and how can we work together to support this transition to biofuels that we need to meet our goals?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I look to the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities programs that we rolled out over the last year. One of those is a jet fuel biofuel that's going to happen in eastern South Dakota. We're helping producers in that particular region have an entirely new opportunity for the marketing of their product, something that doesn't exist today. And I think that's the strength in the partnerships work that we're doing. We've now got industry buy-in to this notion that we should improve market opportunities for the commodities that our producers grow beyond what already exists and continue to spur that innovation that our producers are so keen to deploy when they have an opportunity to meet a need that this country has.
Our farmers in Western Illinois are ready to meet this challenge head on. And so I look forward to working with you. And Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and next we go to Missouri. Representative Alford.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau for being here today. Chief Cosby, good talking with you about turkey hunting in Missouri. Hopefully we can do that together someday. Well, the Endangered Species Act requires agencies to use the best scientific and commercial data available in their analysis on listed species. However, EPA frequently does not consider all the data available, and that's wrong. Chief Cosby, does the NRCS have relevant conservation practice data that would benefit the EPA when reviewing the impact of pesticides on endangered species and their habitats, sir?
So we work very closely with the EPA and the folks over there. We have a seat at the table doing these discussions, and we're making, all of our practice standards and all the data that we have available to be used, and so we have a very good partnership with the EPA.
What type of data has the EPA specifically requested, and what have you provided?
Sir, I'm not part of those discussions, but I know that I have staff there. What I would like to do is take this question back to the team and maybe provide you some information on this at a later date, but I'd be happy to do that.
That would be very helpful because we do have ongoing concerns that the EPA is not using the data as it is supposed to make the proper decisions and the proper rulings. So we would very much appreciate that. The work of your agencies has contributed to delisting of many species under the Endangered Species Act, improving water quality across the U.S., and promoting soil health and conservation. However, I spend a lot of time talking to constituents, but also to anti-agriculture environmentalists that you just cannot regulate your way out of a natural resource concern. In fact, several of my colleagues here today, including Chairman Thompson, sent this very letter to Secretary Vilsack and the President of the United States regarding anti-agriculture climate remarks made by Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry. Administrator Ducheneau, in your opinion, why does voluntary conservation have a better track record than regulation, and why aren't farmers getting the credit they deserve for being good stewards of God's creation?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Alford. I think we're giving the farmers the proper credit at the department and at the agency, and always talking about their role in innovating and preserving production for the future. And our job, again, is to provide the tools to those producers so that they can take a meaningful part in that and continue to promote that soil health, to get those species delisted, and continue to provide incomes and economic opportunity in our rural communities.
Chief Cosby, do you have a comment on that, sir?
Yes, sir. And that's why technical assistance is so important. We have a lot of landowners out there. A lot of times they would like the technical assistance, and sometimes they really don't want the financial assistance. They want to do this on their own, and they're looking for the best and technologies that we have, and it calls through our systems. The other thing is that what we see when we're out working producers, they take pride in their land, and they want to do the best thing they can for their property. And we have so many folks out there that are doing this on their own without government assistance. And you see that on a lot of farms that you're on. And so we try to figure out, how do we give them credit for the work that they're already doing? And we learn from a lot of these folks on some of the conservation measures that they're putting on their farms. So it's a give and take with my staff when they're on the land with these producers to talk about some of the things that we might recommend. And then we learn some of the things that they're doing that has been working for years and years and years. So it's a give and take. That's why we want to keep these programs voluntary.
Let's talk about that, because you say in your opening statement, quote, "We know voluntary conservation works." What are the potential dangers, though, of tying climate scores and DEI initiatives to farming practices in America, Chief Cosby?
Sir, one of the things that we have to look at is that how do we make these programs flexible enough for every person that wants to benefit from these programs are able to participate. You know, one of the things that we used to talk about, every acre counts. I think every acre and every producer counts, no matter where you are on the landscape, whether you're in urban America, or whether you're in suburbia, or whether you're in the rural areas. And when we look at, and I think one of the things we have to do is we have to tell the American public, you know, these investments that we're making in conservation, what are we paying for? What are we buying? What's happening? And because the American taxpayer is the one that's footing these bills, and so we have to be able to tell them what's happening with these investments in conservation.
Chief, thank you so much. Administrator, thank you so much for your attitude here today and your willingness and your candidness. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and next we go to the great state of Florida. Representative Kamey.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to you both for being here today. I'm so glad to see that both of you highlighted the critical role that voluntary conservation programs have on production agriculture in both of your testimonies. I think it's been said multiple times here today by my colleagues, voluntary producer-led and incentive-based conservation programs are the most effective ways that our farmers can be the best stewards of their lands. So I'll just jump right into it. Chief Cosby, can you tell me what vegetative filter strips are?
It is one of the many different practices in our repertoire, but when we talk about vegetative filter strips, we look at, you know, where do they best fit? Is it a waterway? Is it a field border? And so
But specifically what they are?
It is the planting of grasses in an area that might be eroding or have water issues and some of those type things.
Can you tell me the cost?
I cannot, but I can get that information for you, and I think we do those on an acre
Yes.
by acre basis. I can't tell you what that cost is, but I can get that information for you, ma'am.
What about contour terracing? Can you explain that to me?
I've laid out a lot of the contour terracing is when you're farming around the hill and you're trying to divert water to the lowest place to get it out of the field, and I've done that. I did that a lot of years while I was in Iowa and across the Midwest, and they work really effectively.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that you know what, in fact, contour terracing and vegetative filter strips are, because when the EPA was here, they couldn't tell me what it was. And as someone who comes from agriculture, it's pretty troubling when you have someone regulating an industry that they can't really speak about. So I am thrilled that you're able to describe that. But in November, the EPA published an update to their Endangered Species Act work plan that proposed numerous costly mitigation efforts that farmers, ranchers, and producers would be required to implement when using crop protection tools, including field buffers, vegetative filter strips, contour terracing, etc. These regulatory mandates are in direct contrast to our Farm Bill principles that conservation should be voluntary, incentive-based, and locally led. Can you tell me how you are working, and very briefly, because I've got a couple of other follow-up questions, with the EPA to make sure that this conservation effort remains voluntary for our producers?
And we have these discussions, and at all times, we talk about, what our path is at USDA and especially at NRCS, and keeping these programs voluntary and making sure we're working with the producer for the very best positive outcome. And we continue that conversation anytime we're meeting with any agency across our other department across the federal family.
Thank you. Chief and Administrator, when you're staffing for your local offices, what are the onboarding processes for your agencies, and how are those new staffers gaining the necessary local knowledge they need to succeed in the roles that they're filling? And I'll start with you, Administrator, and then to you, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. I appreciate it. When we fill those positions at the local office, a lot of that training happens locally. If they're a program technician, they come on board with the existing staff if they're there. Otherwise, we reach across and capitalize on our ability to work through the team's environment and train in that manner. When it's our county executive directors that we're bringing on, they go through a pretty rigorous training system where they go around that state to several different counties to see firsthand how those counties deliver the programs before they're offered a chance to lead in that county.
Perfect.
And it's critical that they have that opportunity to get in there, roll their sleeves up, and get some experience that's guided, because we all know it's important to have some working knowledge of what is going on so that they can bring their own unique skills to the table in a manner that can help them innovate and continue to provide better service to our producers.
Thank you. Mr. Cosby, very quickly, if you could.
Yes, as we bring that local staff on, we team those up with the local folks in that office. A lot of times we ask producers in the county actually to help mentor those new employees, because a lot of the folks are, a lot of these employees are not farm kids anymore, and they're coming from different sectors. And so we try to do that. The training happens right there locally. It's all mostly on-the-job training. It's been pretty difficult the last couple of years because of COVID.
Right.
But then there are some national trainings, but we try to make sure, since these are locally led programs, we try to make sure those employees get that local training.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn to FSA now. I'm sure that you're aware, Administrator, that FSA is facing staff shortages and that it is hurting our rural communities. In fact, it's one of the main things that I hear about from my producers, not just in my district, but across the state of Florida. Administrator, what do you believe is causing this shortage, and what is your agency specifically doing to address the shortages of FSA personnel?
I think there is a stigma in this country about the reality of federal service, and I think too often people are persecuted for engaging in federal service and painted as part of a bureaucracy. And I think instead we should look at these folks as the forefront of delivery of essential programs and services to our rural communities to give them the lifeblood they need to have economic opportunity. And we all need to get together and start to brag on our county staff the way the Secretary and I do, instead of treating them like they're part of some inefficient federal bureaucracy, which just frankly isn't true.
I appreciate that comment, and I'll send a few of my follow-ups for the record. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and next we go to Ohio, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this hearing as we seek to support efforts by our nation's agricultural producers to sustain both agricultural production as well as the future viability of our natural resources. I'd like to extend a special note of gratitude to NRCS Chief Terry Cosby, who acted as NRSC Ohio State Conservationist for 16 years and recognized his efforts towards adoption of critical conservation programs in the great state of Ohio, my state, and now throughout the country. Welcome, Chief Crosby. It's great to see you. Likewise, I would like to call attention to the Ohio Agriculture Conservation Initiative, a partnership between agriculture, conservation, environmental, and research communities to recognize farmers for their dedication to advancing methods that improve water quality in Ohio and increasing the number of farm best management practices. These collaborative efforts offer farmers the ability to proactively employ modern science-based practices and carry out water quality solutions to sustain resources. Toward that end, and chief, among critical conservation objectives I have heard include maintaining working lands conservation programs, streamlining the NRCS conservation practice approval process, allowing for flexibility, and addressing local and regional resource challenges. As the operator of Bowers Farms of Wayne County, Ohio, who is awarded the Soil and Water Conservation District's Conservation Farm Award noted, we try to look at our conservation practices as the right thing to do with the soils we farm. Chief Crosby, I understand the United States and Canada have formed a partnership to prioritize the restoration of Lake Erie and other Great Lakes. As a part of that effort, the NRCS, along with 5 other federal agencies, state and other non-government, industry, and academic partners, are dedicated to accelerating Lake Erie's rehabilitation through a number of collaborative projects and initiatives, including the Western Lake Erie Basin Project. How can NRCS best provide technical and financial assistance to farmers to implement conservation practices such as Lake Erie rehabilitation and assist in a comprehensive effort to improve water quality, soil health, and sustain the region's economic viability and farm capabilities?
Sir, thank you for that question. And when I was back there in Ohio, I had an opportunity to start the Western Lake Erie Basin Project back probably from day one, back in 2006, 2007. So it was a fun project to work on. And through that effort, we were able to bring in funds to help. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? You know, we had the water crisis up there along the lake, and we've been working very diligently there with the NRCS staff and team. And we've been working very closely with the partnership with the governor's office, with the DNR director, the EPA director, and the Department of Agriculture, and looking at how these programs can be effective. We did an RCP project in that basin. We have what we call the Western Lake Erie Basin Project, where the dollars are dedicated to help farmers up there with cover cropping. And I tell you what, we are still continuing to work in the Western Lake Erie Basin. It is, you know, it's 25% of all of the fresh water in this country that's held there, and I think that we have to continue doing that.
Thank you, Chief. For Administrator, I'm heartened by federal conservation programs that assist our farmers, ranchers, and landowners through the voluntary adoption of sound conservation programs that benefit my district and the entire region. More specifically, I understand December of '22, the United States Department of Agriculture and the state of Ohio continued a partnership through the Farm Service Agency Lake Erie Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program to assist Ohio farmers and agricultural landowners in improving water quality and conserving other natural resources through voluntary incentive-based conservation programs. Please let us know how the Ohio Lake Erie CREP, which includes Medina County and my congressional district, offered by USDA, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources through conservation practices such as buffer strips, grasslands, and wetlands, is improving water quality and making a positive impact on the natural resources and farming operations throughout Ohio.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. As with all of our CREP program agreements that we offer, it puts the producers and their stakeholder groups in the driver's seat of addressing what those conservation reserve or conservation concerns are. And as an example, you know, one of the things we need to think about is that while there are individual producer decisions to be made, we're in this together. You mentioned the multi-state, multinational cooperative around Lake Erie.
Right.
We need to be able to put resource concerns together and help producers have the tools to address those things that they have in common to have a more meaningful impact. So I think that's one of the values that our CREP agreement has, is that it lets us amplify the impact by getting some economies of scale on those conservation measures that we deploy and multiply those impacts on top of each other.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank our witnesses, and I yield back, Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. And now I would like to invite my ranking member to share any closing comments she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau, for your testimony today. Thank you for your extraordinary answers, very detailed, to the questions asked this afternoon. Your dedication to conservation and supporting America's farmers, ranchers, and foresters is clear, and I am so grateful for your work at the helm of these important agencies. The programs you all administer provide vital support to farmers, but also to all of us who benefit from the conservation and environmental benefits of the important conservation work that farmers and producers are doing thanks to these programs. Through continued efforts by your teams, our producers can volunteer to conserve their lands for future generations. They can employ conservation practices on their operations, and they can help meet our shared goals for healthy lands, water, and air. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you to your teams and staffs for their work, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing today. I yield back.
Thank you. And I want to thank both of our witnesses for being here today, Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau, for sharing your visions and so on for our conservation programs. And you know, Chief, you mentioned something that I found interesting. You mentioned that some of those dams out across the country, those small dams, are at 50 or 60 years old and may be at the end of their useful life. But I know when I was a kid growing up, we had some floods and we farmed some bottom ground, and the farmers all got together with the local USDA folks, and they came up with small dams up the tributaries to those streams, and those are getting to be 50 or 60 years old. But I would just want to share that those were very effective. They went up those tributaries, they held the water and let it down. So I just wanted to reinforce that we probably ought to keep those. But anyway, I want to thank the ranking member for being here today, and I appreciate your participation. This has been a very helpful conversation for our members, and we look forward to working with you and your agencies as the 2023 Farm Bill does move forward. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. And with that, this hearing of the Subcommittee on Conservation, Research, and Biotechnology is adjourned.